Well, what is up, IB Nation? We are here for yet another game day show. We're talking Clemson. We're talking Notre Dame. It's week 10. Here we go, Jess. You ready for this thing or what?
I'm ready, Vince. You know, this question just came to me as we were starting the show. Are you more or less happy that Clemson is at where they're at? Or so like, does this game, are you more nervous because Clemson is 4-4, or would you be more nervous if Clemson was like 6-2? And does the current state of where Clemson at take some of the excitement away from the game for you?
Oh man, that's a pretty loaded question, and I'm sure
Because
we're
it's
gonna
like if
jump.
the 4-4 is like, do you falter and lose a game you're supposed to win, and then like potentially if it's like a 6-2, 7-1 Clemson, it's like a much more high stake game, right? Like I think it's more nerve wracking. So it's like, which side do you lean to almost?
It's funny that you bring that up because I think I'm not as nervous about this game as I normally would be, based
Okay,
on if this was a night game, if this was a 7-1 Clemson team, if this was, super high stakes, the whole thing. I think I would be a little bit more nervous about the way this thing was going to go. But at the same time, I feel very good about the matchups that Notre Dame has against Clemson. So
same.
I would feel good about the actual matchup itself, but like the implications and all of that. I mean, there's a lot riding on this game. We're going to talk about that here in a little bit. There's still a lot riding on this game, right? Notre Dame
Right.
needs to win out. They need to win out. They need to do what they need to do, to make it into a New Year's Six. They need to do all of that. So there's still a lot riding on it. If you're Notre Dame, but then you've got Clemson. Like, are they the wounded animal that like they've got nothing to lose and
Right.
they're
That's
just
what I mean.
you know what I mean? So there's a lot going into it. That's for sure. Look, it's still Clemson. They're still a big name.
Right.
This is still a big win for Notre Dame. I don't care that they're a 4-4 team. I still think this is a big win. I mean, going into the season, this is the
I
big
think
three,
that's a
right?
better way of asking the question is, do you still view this as a big game, even though Clemson isn't where we thought they were going to be?
It's still Clemson. Like
Right.
it's still Clemson. So is it as big of a game as it was? No, but it's still a big game. Like you still got to
Right.
go out there and win. So like, I guess it's not the exact same, but like, let's say Notre Dame and Alabama get matched up in a New Year's Six game, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think we can all agree that this is not an Alabama team of old,
Right.
but it's still Alabama.
It
Like
still looks good when you put a win up against Alabama, no matter what
exactly.
season it is.
Exactly. So it's not exactly apples to apples, it's a little apples to oranges, but it's the same concept, right? It'd be a little bit of a down Alabama team that Notre Dame would beat in a bowl game, but it's still Alabama. Like this is still Clemson. You still have a losing record all time against Clemson. So,
Yeah,
you still want to go out and win this thing, right?
I agree.
All right, Jess. So let's talk a little bit about last week. Obviously, Notre Dame beat up on Pitt 58-7 last Saturday afternoon at Notre Dame Stadium. What is your biggest takeaway from that game from the Notre Dame side?
I think the biggest takeaway I have is I got to be in attendance for more games. This is my first game since before COVID, I think, and they won 58-7. So I think I got to start going to more games first of all. But on a serious note, my biggest takeaway is this team can beat you in multiple ways. It's like when they design like airplanes and stuff, when one part fails, you still have to have other parts that like basically pick up the slack for the part that's failing, right? Like just because one thing fails doesn't mean the whole plane is going to fail, essentially. And I
Redundancy,
feel
right?
that's kind of how
Isn't that
Notre
what
Dame
it's
has
called?
been. Yeah, so that's yeah, and so like that's what I feel like Notre Dame was last week against Pittsburgh. Not everything was clicking for them offensively, in my opinion. They put up a huge inflated number, but it just felt like USC again. They got opportunity. There was a muff punt touchdown, there was a pick six, there was turnovers. I mean, Pittsburgh couldn't move the ball. Notre Dame was getting the ball in favorable field position. I mean, realistically, those first two drives ended in interceptions, and that can't happen against your Clemsons. That can't
Right.
happen. To me, at this stage in the season, I didn't like what I saw from the offense, to be honest with you, in the first half. And so I guess what I'm getting at is even when the offense isn't clicking, this team can find ways to beat you. And I think that's a mark of a good team is even when one thing is off on a particular night, you can still find a way to win. Now, obviously, I'd like to see it, it all be cleaned up in a final, polished product. But hopefully we get there. But I like I said, I think my biggest takeaway is that Notre Dame can win with other things kind of deficient at the same time.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it was a pretty complete game, obviously, by Notre Dame. All three phases scored. All three phases were borderline dominant. I mean, there were parts of the offense, obviously, that didn't look good, but they still racked up over 500 yards of total offense. The defense had a ton of takeaways. The special teams scored a couple touchdowns. It was a complete game for Notre Dame, and it feels like they're ascending when they should be ascending. Now, if this was like Indiana high school football, this would be fantastic. They're ascending at the end of the season going into the playoffs. Notre Dame, their losses that they have are obviously going to prevent them from getting into the college football playoff. And so, there would be these cynics out there that would be like, who cares if they're ascending right now? It doesn't matter. But I think as a program, I feel very good about where this team is based on what they did against an inferior team in Pittsburgh at home, in the afternoon. They put it to them in all phases of the game. And so, that's my biggest takeaway is that this team plays very complimentary football. 2 weeks ago or 2 games ago, I should say, the offense was efficient because the defense gave them amazing field position all night long. And they did a great job with it, right? They didn't get as good a field position this time around, but after the first 2 possessions, and even in those first 2 possessions, Jess, I mean, they still moved the football.
I think that was the frustrating part is they were moving the ball really well and just couldn't punch it in that last 30 to 20 yards.
Yes, very frustrating, frankly, if you were a Notre Dame fan, because those were the first 2 drives of the game, right?
Right.
And so, I feel good about the complimentary piece as you do. So I think that's a good thing. Now, 2 weeks in a row, Notre Dame has scored points on special teams. Oh, no, I got to back up a little bit. So, nope, that's exactly where I wanted to be. All right, 2 weeks in a row. Yeah, I'm not good at being the host, man. I'm used to being on the other side of it. We miss your dad. That's really what
I know. He makes it look easy.
He sent me pictures today that they went and saw the Mona Lisa and they went to the Louvre and all these different things. Like, he's living the dream, man. And you and I
I got a selfie from the Eiffel Tower yesterday. I was like, oh, cool. Yep. I'm working double overtime,
Yeah, exactly.
When mom's gone, that means I got to do mom duties. When dad's gone, that means I got to do dad duties. So,
yep. You got it, man. And you actually have a day job as well.
Yeah.
So,
and then you try to sleep and work out, and it's like, all right, what is there any time left?
Yeah, I know, right? We're missing our boy Sean, but he's over there having the time of his life over there in Paris, France. So, touche to him. All right, so 2 weeks in a row, Notre Dame has scored points on special teams. What are the chances that we see it happen a third week in a row?
I am gonna if this was a scale of 1 to 10, and 10 being I was extremely confident they were gonna get another one again this week, a special teams touchdown. I think I'm gonna put this at a 2 or 3, to be honest with you, just because this is a Clemson team that is going to be, I would assume, cleaned up, right? I think Dabo knows who they are defensively. I think he knows who they are offensively. And so when you're playing a good team like Notre Dame, I'm sure the emphasis all week was, hey, we can't give them extra points in special teams or turnovers or mistakes because we're already kind of outmatched as is, right? I'm sure he didn't say that, but that's kind of his game plan preparation, right? And so I think Clemson will be very cleaned up in the special teams. And then if we're looking at it statistically and probability wise, the probability of getting a third straight touchdown from your special teams, or a third straight week from your touchdown, or a touchdown from your special teams, those odds aren't very high as well. So again, just a combination of, getting 3 in a row. And then also, like I said, Dabo kind of having things cleaned up, or at least I think that's how it's going to go. I put this at around a 2 or 3.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same neighborhood. I mean, the chances of it's like getting that third strike in a row when you're bowling. The odds are just astronomical for the average bowler, right? And I feel that's the way for special teams. If they do score on special teams, the odds that they're going to win the game, I think, go through the roof.
Yeah,
If they
I
score a
agree.
special teams, it's game over, man. Like there's no way Notre Dame loses. Now, obviously, there's still a path to victory without scoring on special teams, and so I just feel like I'm in the neighborhood that you are. I was thinking like a 3. If we were going to do a scale of 1 to 10, it's very difficult to repeat that 3 weeks in a row. And look, the special teams are playing at a high level right now. There's no doubt about it. The return game is on. I wouldn't mind seeing a block kick. I don't think we've really seen that at all this year. So I wouldn't mind seeing that. But the special teams are playing at a high level. And I think they take a lot of pride in their special teams, obviously stemming back to last year. So
Yeah, I think what we've like last season it was all about block punts. This season we're getting more of like we got a kick return touchdown, we got a punt return touchdown. I think that I
yeah,
want to say they blocked one punt at some point this season, if I'm not mistaken. I think they snuck one in. So I mean, it's just you're getting a good amount of output. You're just getting it in a different way this season.
yeah,
But as a fan, I've been elated with the special teams the last 2 years, and I think it's great to see a head coach that actually puts an emphasis in special
yeah,
teams because it can have such a large impact on the game. Because, like you said, like who wants to play Notre Dame when they're also getting touchdowns in the special teams unit, right? Like when the defense is creating the turnovers, potentially creating touchdowns themselves, or at least setting the offense up for easy points. The special teams is clicking. Audric Esime is doing his thing consistently. It's just, I feel like it gets it's like an avalanche effect very quickly when you start adding special teams touchdowns for
oh
Notre Dame.
yeah. And look, special teams, and we've all been in a stadium when a special teams touchdown gets scored. I mean, it's a huge momentum shift. Like
Yeah, it's just a
it's
different kind of touchdown.
man, yeah, absolutely. So it gets the fans fired up if it's a home game. I mean, or it absolutely kills any kind of stadium vibe when it's an away game. I mean, I would love to see Notre Dame bring a kick back or block a punt for a touchdown or whatever. I mean, that would just be a backbreaker for Clemson. And Clemson is a team that's right on the edge, man. We've talked about this. Like, they're right there. And honestly, an early special teams touchdown could just push them right off the cliff,
Right.
which I'm here for. That's for sure. So let's talk about the defense from last week a little bit, Jesse. So we've seen back-to-back games where the defense has played extremely well, like out of this world defense. The offense is moving in the right direction. So what can you say that you absolutely know about this team going into week 10? Do we have an absolute?
I would say I have an absolute, and one of my absolutes would be this team rolls or kind of feeds through their defense, offensive or defense at this point, right? I feel like, and this would go for a lot of teams, right? When your defense plays like this, but I feel like the defense is what gives the rest of the team kind of confidence, right? Like when the defense is calm, they've settled in and they're doing their thing. I feel like that gives the rest of the group a little bit more confidence because not that you're like relying on it, but you know that you have a good defense, right? And so not everything becomes critical on every offensive possession, right? Like you don't feel the need that like we need to score here, right? But like that's always the goal is to score points. But I feel like this team, what I definitely know is that they play through their defense, and I think that's no coincidence. Knowing the background of where this head coach came from, of being a defensive coordinator, right? And so I think a big part of Marcus Freeman's philosophy is have a good defense, slow it down when we get the ball on offense, a little more time of possession, a little bit let's pound you, let's let that open up our pass game. And so I think everything starts with the defense. That's what I know 100% absolute about this team. Everything starts with its defense.
Yeah, mine was going to be defensively as well. I think we know who this team is defensively. Like I feel like in year 2 of Al Golden, this defense is going to be an attacking style of defense. It's going to be a defense that is very fundamentally sound at this point. I mean, they're making
Very smart.
Yes, very smart, and headed by JD Bertrand, right? I mean, that's his best attribute is his intelligence, and I think that's very obvious when you look at this defense. I mean, right now, this is a completely different defense than what they were playing last year. And they played good defense last year. they're playing great defense now
Playing great
in the
defense
second
now.
half of this year.
And I think it goes into what Marcus Freeman has always talked about. We play better. You play better velocity wise when you have an understanding of what's going
Yes.
on. I just think the defense is clearly more comfortable this season under Al Golden. And, another great thing that this defense does is it disguises coverages. It disguises, stunts. They're not just doing the same thing over and over. They're very creative on every play and trying to confuse the quarterback. And like you said, like at every level in the defensive line, linebackers, and secondary, I mean, you pretty much know what you're going to get out of all those position groups. You flip it over to the offensive line, the offense. I feel like maybe the offensive line is the only, and maybe the running back is, what you can say that you're going to get the same thing out of every week. I don't think you can say that for Sam Hartman. And you definitely can't say that for the wide receiver room. You just don't know every week who's going to be that guy offensively, right? And that's the thing is they just I wouldn't say they're struggling to put up points, but they're struggling to be consistent. And again, I think it goes back to Sam Hartman hasn't been consistent every game, and that's not me saying he's been playing bad, but when you have 120 passing yards one game and then close to 300 the next, and no passing touchdowns and in a few games, I just think that the wide receiver room and Sam Hartman are a little inconsistent on a week-to-week basis.
No, I think that's fair. I think that's really fair. And I think, if you're Marcus Freeman going into any game, I think there's certain things that you can count on. And I think his defense playing a solid to great game is something that you can count on. And, that's a great place to be if you're a head coach, knowing you have some absolutes, when you're putting together the game plan, right? I know that side of the ball has their stuff together and they're going to be good to great. And I just think that that's who this defense is right now. And that, again, great place to be if you're Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman. No doubt about that.
Let me float this by you. I was reading a quote on Twitter earlier this week, and it just kind of stuck with me. I'm just curious. It kind of fits this. I'm curious what your thoughts might be. The quote basically said, defense wins you games or matchups. The offense tells you by how much you won. Is that kind of how you feel about Notre Dame, essentially? You know what I mean? Like, the defense is winning these games for them. Like defense won the game for them against USC. Defense won the game for them against Pittsburgh. I mean, yeah, special teams too, but like the offense and the tells you by how much, right? Because the defense is playing so great. And so that's kind of how I feel about this team. The defense is winning them games. The offense is just telling you by how much they're winning these games.
Sure. And look, the defense played amazing last game. There's no doubt about it. The offense put up a bunch of points as well because they knew that they could take some chances. And that's the other thing about having a great defense, right? Offensively, you can take chances and potentially turn the ball over, and it's not going to be as big of a deal because you've got a lot of faith in what your defense can do, right? And so they took some shots down the field. They did some things, not uncharacteristic, but some things that aren't guaranteed offensively, and it paid off for them because they know what kind of defense they have. So it just makes everybody's job easier when you've got something that you can count on like defense. There's no doubt about it. And that's my absolute. Like I feel very, very good about where this defense is and where they're going the rest of the season as well. And so Marcus Freeman said that this game was the most complete game that they've had in all three phases. What do you say to that?
I think Marcus Freeman is a really good salesman at some perspectives. If you start looking at the schedule, Navy, Tennessee State, North Carolina State, Central Michigan, I'm kind of throwing those games out the window. I'm looking at the chunk of the schedule: Ohio State, Duke, Louisville, USC, and Pittsburgh. And when you're looking at that core of games, I would have to agree with him just because of the production that you got in all three phases. All three phases scored a touchdown, and that hasn't happened in any of the game. Well, no, that happened against USC as well. And so it comes down to, do you feel Notre Dame played better offensively against USC, or do you feel Notre Dame played better offensively against Pittsburgh? And I would have to say against Pittsburgh because their defense is the best thing supposedly about Pittsburgh's team. Like when you're comparing Pittsburgh's defense
Sure.
to USC's defense, I think you could say that Pittsburgh defense is probably better than USC's defense. And so they
Sure.
put up more total yardage against Pittsburgh. But again, I don't know why, but I can't get those interceptions out of my mind. They're really holding me back about that Pittsburgh game. And I know they happened early, and I know, like you were saying, they might have taken a few more shots because of knowing, the situation. But I guess at the end of the day, they did play better offensively against Pitt. So I'd have to agree because of that, scoring in all three phases and the way the offense looked compared to some of these other games, I would have to go with Pittsburgh. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, complementary play, right? All three phases complemented each other. The return, the fumble recovery for a touchdown, the pick six, all the 38 points that the offense scored, like they were all feeding off of each other. And so I agree. I think it is the most complete game that they've had so far this year. And I think that, that's tough to do. I mean, there's no such thing as a perfect game. Obviously, they threw 2 picks offensively. There were things that, it's the great thing about the game of football, Jesse, is you can always go back and nitpick certain things,
There's
even
always
in
going to
a
be something wrong.
58-7 game. Like you won by 51 points, and you can go back and nitpick plenty about that game, right? And so that's a good thing about sports, man. There's no such thing as a perfect game. So except for baseball, and even then you throw balls. So I mean, it's not perfect. But so anyway, another thing that from Freeman's press conference that I want to ask you about. He said, quote, "You'd rather do a few things at level 10 than a lot of things at level 7, unquote. So what are your thoughts on that philosophy?
Yeah, I agree with that philosophy at the end of the day, because I think what he's saying is it's like, to me, the best analogy that I could come up with is would you rather have a lot of friends or acquaintances? Would you rather have like 20 friends who you're just like, oh yeah, like, we're friends, we talk every now and then? Or would you rather have 5 really close friends that you can always rely on? And that kind of situation, just like best friends essentially. And so that's the way I look at it. And I would have to agree with him, because you can't get caught up in doing a bunch of things really good unless you master them kind of one by one. You have to have that singular focus of mastering one thing and then going on to the next, rather than trying to juggle mastering like 5 things at once. So I agree with him. I think it's a more microscopic outlook, and you want to master some few, like, again, I would rather be really good at 3 things than average at like 10 things. And so that's kind of how I look at it at the end of the day. And once you master those things, you can go one by one and not have to think about, the conglomerate of things that you only do at average.
Knowing you always go out and you get these great analogies and all these different things. Like, I'm just looking at it from a football standpoint. Like, as a play caller, when you can go to a certain play and it's going to work, or that you can go to a certain look defensively and it's going to work because your kids are bought in and they just thrive in that look or whatever, like that's like a warm blanket at night. Like you just go to it and it feels good and it's going to be successful. You know what I mean? And so I especially at the college level, like the NFL is a different story, but like high school, college, like you've got to be able to master the basics. You got to be able to be really, really good at certain things. Because if you can do that, it's just like, remember the Titans, right? What does he say? 7 planes, just like Novocaine. Give it time. It always works. I mean, that's kind of how it is, man. Like, my kid's team is going to play a triple option team. They don't have a whole lot of plays, but they're real good at them,
Yeah,
And
see, you're giving some good, football analogies now. It's like, yeah, when you play that triple option, what's coming, but they've mastered
right.
it so well that like you just
Exactly.
can't stop it sometimes.
That's 100% accurate, man. And so, that's what I love about his philosophy. Now you got to follow through with it. Don't try to be too cute, at certain times. Don't be that guy. Stick with what you're good at. Stick with what you know.
So don't throw a screen on 2nd and long against Ohio State.
Your variations can complement what you do very, very well. Right. And if you stick to that philosophy, I think you can be pretty stinking successful. And I think that's, what Marcus Freeman wants to be at the end of the day. Now we have to see that on a regular basis, I think, in an actual game.
Well, I think what you're saying too, you have a larger impact when you master the things first. Because if you master a really good run scheme and you keep showing it and showing it, it only makes the variation that more impactful. And aka when you hit a play action out of the same run formation that's been hitting, 6 a pop, 8 a pop, 10 a pop, 15 a pop, and now you throw in a wrinkle off it or variation because you've mastered that run play. You know what I mean? You've mastered it. It's a 10 out of 10. And now you work in that variation. It's going to be more impactful because you've mastered that first look.
Yep, nailed it. That's exactly right. And that's how football needs to be played, man. You set it up. You set things up with one way that you're really, really good at, and you have some variation that goes off of it, and you're just successful.
That's why Sean McVay is a really good. When he won that Super Bowl with the Rams, that's what he was really, really good at play calling. Is he would give you one look that would still get him 4 or 5 yards, and he'd show you that same look, with just something slightly different. And it's really cool that this conversation has like opened up my mind to that.
Love it. That's what we do. We open minds around here at Irish Breakdown. Jesse Stires. That's what we do. All right. Got a game to talk about. So let's talk about Clemson. Notre Dame comes into this game ranked number 15 in the college football playoff ranking that just came out on Tuesday. They've got a 7-2 record. They're going on the road to Clemson, who's 4-4 and has lost one game at home already, which is shocking in a lot of ways. How big of a game is this for Clemson, Jesse, based on where they are with their season sitting at 500 with, 4 games to go?
Yeah, so when you start I haven't looked at this at the scope or inside a scope of what this kind of game means for Clemson. And so it's like when you're looking at it, who does it mean more to? Because if you're looking at it on the Notre Dame side, this is a game like Marcus Freeman's biggest downfall, or not downfall, or maybe biggest critique so far is these sort of games. Not necessarily a trap game, but a game where you're favored, but you're going against a team that's still solid, still fundamentally sound, still has a very good head coach, right? And so you can get it. You could quickly kind of be on the back end of this if you don't do what you're supposed to, right? At the end of the day. And that could potentially lead to a loss. But then you look at the flip side, Clemson is 4-4 after averaging like basically 12 wins a season for the last 10-11 years, right?
Yeah, and this is uncharted territory for a good generation of Clemson fans.
Right. And then you add in last year's game, right? Dabo got embarrassed. And then you add in everything that's gone on this week in the media with Dabo, right? Basically getting questioned about his legitimacy of a head coach. And now you're welcoming in probably the second or third, second toughest team that they've probably played so far, right? And it's at home. It's on your home ground. It's a noon kickoff. And so you add all that stuff up with Clemson, and they're not even bowl eligible yet. And so I feel like this is a really big game for Clemson for all those reasons. This is a pride game for Clemson, right? Like has to be what Dabo is feeding into this week is how prideful are you guys as a team? Clearly it hasn't gone our way this season, but a big opportunity is at your doorstep. And you're welcoming in a team into your own home after what they did to us last year. I think this is a big game for Clemson, and I think it's going to be built up in that manner for Dabo. And that's why I feel that's kind of like when we started the show, I feel like this game, I'm worried about it for different reasons than I was going into the season at the beginning. I was going to be worried about because I thought Clemson was going to be a 6-2, 7-1 team, tough matchup. You're on the road. It's hard to play at Clemson, but now they're 4-4. And like I was saying, there's the pride kicks in. And it's like, what are you guys playing for at this point in the season, right? Are you going to step up to the occasion? And so I'm equally worried about it, but I do think this game has a lot of implications for Clemson and the rest of their season. Because if they lose this, I mean, there's potential you lose to North Carolina, to North Carolina and to South Carolina. And if you lose to Notre Dame, that's 3 losses. You're not going to be bowl eligible. And so there's a lot on this game for me personally.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think Clemson, and this is actually within the scope of the actual season itself, I feel like this is almost a bigger game for Clemson than it is for Notre Dame. I could easily
100%.
make that argument very easily because you're right. They're teetering on bowl eligibility at this point. And if Notre Dame comes out and let's say Notre Dame comes out and dominates Clemson. Like, I think the rest of their season is just like wrong direction. They're going to spiral. They're going to lose more games. They're not going to be bowl eligible. And then, what happens with Clemson? You would think Dabo Swinney has enough, in the tank that he's not going to get fired or anything crazy like that. But there's going to probably be wholesale changes to the assistant staff. Are they going to change their thought process on the portal? Like, all of these different things and all of these different conversations are going to start, right? If it's a close game against Notre Dame and still a loss, you can pull some positives out of it, maybe not let it dwindle, longer than this week. And it doesn't affect, moving on to the remaining games in the season. But then if they win this game, like we were talking about the USC game for Notre Dame, like, is a win going to salvage the season? All those kinds of, question marks and conversations. And a win for Clemson here could potentially salvage their season. Now they're 5-4. They only got to win a couple more games to be, one more game to be bowl eligible at that point. And they've got, some other stuff to play for right in front of them. So, I think this game is bigger for Clemson than it is for Notre Dame within this season, right? Yeah. If you expand out to like bigger picture, like, big wins for Marcus Freeman, right? Things of that nature, then I think maybe it's bigger for Notre Dame, because for Clemson, it could be a one-off and they come back next year just as strong and all of those different things. But like, I think bigger picture, it builds the momentum that is Marcus Freeman's tenure at Notre Dame as they continue to march towards an not undefeated, but like, winning out for the rest of the way, a New Year's Six, all of those different things, right? So I think big picture is bigger for Notre Dame. I think small picture is bigger for Clemson.
Yeah, and for all of the, mathematical nerds out there like myself, this game is what I consider a point of inflection for Clemson. And point of inflection means you've basically become stagnant, and you're either going to go up or you're either going to go down, right? And so that's what this game is for Clemson. Like, this game, if Clemson loses, I just see them nosediving, to be honest with you, with the remaining schedule they have and everything that's been going on. But if they can somehow find a way to win this game, I think it's enough of a boost or a confidence to kind of propel them to finish out this season how they want. And so, yeah, there's a lot riding on this game because, Marcus Freeman loses, and, obviously you don't know what's going to happen in the next two games, but you assume they go 9-3. Is 9-3 really the improvement we were hoping to see after an 8-4 season last year? So it's like there's large implications on both sides. But like you said, one's more of a macro view and one's more of like a microscopic view.
Yeah, because if you're a Clemson fan, I mean, realistically, 8-4 sounds with a win over Notre Dame sounds a heck of a lot better than whatever their record would be if they lose this game, right?
Yeah. Because that's what I mean, because it's like a compounding effect after they lose this game.
5-7, 6-6, at the very best, 7-5. Like 8-4 just sounds a heck of a lot better than any of those other options, right? And then you can go, then you're bowl eligible. You're going to a mid-tier bowl. You go win that. Now you're 9-4. Like, I realize that's not Clemson, but it's way better than alternative at this point. I mean, you've already got the 4 losses, so that's not going to change. What can change is what happens in the future. So I think this is a pivotal game for Clemson. There's no doubt about that. So this is just the 8th meeting all time between these schools, with Clemson holding a slight 4-3 advantage. Obviously, the last time out, Notre Dame defeated Clemson 35-14 at Notre Dame Stadium in arguably Marcus Freeman's biggest win to date. Notre Dame is 3-2 in the regular season against Clemson, while they hold a 2-0 edge in the postseason. So, Jesse, we're going to flip it a little bit, even though we kind of talked about it already. But how big of a game is this for Notre Dame this season?
It's a huge game for Notre Dame because I think this win propels you to the finish line It gives you that, that juice with a bye week and 2 games left against, a Wake Forest and a Stanford team. I'm not trying to get ahead of myself, but I feel like if you win this one again, it propels you to kind of get through those last 2 games of the season, make your statement, and then sit and see how everything else shakes out, and hopefully get into a New Year's Six bowl game like you want, and then you start looking at, like I said, that if they lose, best case you're 9-3, you're probably in the Pop-Tart Bowl. And me personally, I'm questioning, did we see enough growth in Marcus Freeman from year 1 to year 2, 8-4 to 9-3. And so I do think this game is really big for Notre Dame, because again, if you win, it gets you to that New Year's Six path that you're hoping to get to. And then if you lose, I think you start getting into more of those question marks and critiques of the head coach.
It's a good call. I didn't even think about the head coach kind of angle to this whole thing. I mean, the win-loss record is what it is, right? And at the beginning of the season,
that's what you get evaluated on.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. At the beginning of the season, we all talked about, the ceiling is 12-0, the floor is 10-2. Well,
right,
you already got those 2.
You're in the basement then if you go 9-3.
Exactly, that's exactly right, and you are officially in disappointing season territory. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, this season,
I think getting more losses this season outside of a bowl game is a disappointment.
Absolutely, and even at that point, I think a loss in a bowl game would be a disappointment too, depending on how it goes, depending on which bowl game it is, right? And so I think, this is incredibly important for Notre Dame, because this win, if they win this game, I have full confidence that they're going to go and win the last 2 without much of an issue, because they know exactly what they're playing for. They'll be top 10 in the college football playoff, which means they'll be in a New Year's Six. And then I don't care who they play. They just need to get that win, because
get that monkey off your back.
Absolutely. Because as Brian pointed out, I think in one of the shows that we did earlier, there are no more New Year's Six games, Jesse. Like, this is it, because once they go to the 12-team playoff, all those games are going to be part of the playoff now. They're not going to be a New Year's Six scenario anymore, right? This is literally your last chance to win a New Year's Six game. The last chance. And so, go out swinging, man. Like, go out and win that thing. They haven't – what year were you born again?
6.
Oh, my 96. Gosh. Okay. So they haven't won a New Year's Six game in your lifetime.
Right.
And they haven't won one since I was 12 years old. So
yeah, it was sad growing up. The Fiesta Bowl, the LSUs, the Ohio States. And then most recently that Oklahoma State game. That was the worst.
That was terrible.
I felt so good at halftime, and then I think literally my smile just like dropped a quarter of an inch like every 10 minutes. And by the time the game was over, I was like, what is happening right now?
The first half was so –
it's probably the best half I've ever seen them play.
The first half was so good that it was almost boring. And like, you get to halftime.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, oh, is this game going to end? Like this? Like, yeah. There's no way.
Like, the second half is going to be even more boring. And it certainly wasn't boring, because obviously they gave up the lead and lost. But that was just such a weird game, man. And
I hated it.
It's just terrible on so many levels. So Notre Dame has to get out there, and they've got to make things happen in this postseason. They got to get to a New Year's Six. They got to win it. And then we can just not talk about that anymore. Like, that's my goal. So, 10-2, here we go. All right. So let's talk about this Clemson team. So Dabo Swinney, talked about him. He's been under fire here for the last week or so. He's been the Tigers head coach since 2009. He's got 2 national titles, 8 ACC championships. I mean, he's no stranger to winning. He's gotten Clemson to the upper echelon, tier 1, of college football. It's been very impressive. What has not been impressive has been the play of Clemson so far this season. So you got Cade Klubnik. He's got 13 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. It's his first full year starting. Obviously, Notre Dame got a little piece of Cade Klubnik when he came in to the game last year. Immediately got picked off, so obviously that didn't end well for him. So I'm hoping he has, similar nightmares about this particular game after it's over. But he's just shy of 2,000 yards in the air. He's completing 64% of his passes, 243 yards a game. He is a threat to run the ball, to move the chains, but he's also a threat to get sacked. He's gained 260 yards. He's also lost 170. So he is apt to getting sacked. He doesn't really want to get outside the pocket. Their offense is literally the definition of average. There's 130 teams in college football or, Division I football, and they are like 64th in scoring offense, 67th in rush, 46th in pass, 49th in total. Like, they're literally mediocre offensively, right? Heck of a matchup against Notre Dame's defense. So I like this particular matchup. And then you throw in the fact that all of a sudden Clemson has a ton of injuries as well, Jesse. And that's what we have to talk about, because the injury bug has hit Clemson hard. Will Shipley is still day-to-day, according to Dabo, and last time he spoke with the media. Tiger Illustrated has reported that the left guard, Marcus Tate, suffered a knee injury in practice, and he's going to be out for an extended period of time. But then they're also reporting that left tackle Colin Sadler is out, so the entire left side of the offensive line is going to be out. I didn't know
all this.
And then Tyler Brown, the wide receiver, he's also dealing with injuries that could keep him out on Saturday. So star running back day-to-day, left side of your offensive line, wide receiver, all potentially out for this game. So you're taking as the kids would say, a mid offense, and you're taking away potentially, 4 starters? That doesn't bode well for the Tigers down in Death Valley.
No, it doesn't. And what you talked about, Cade Klubnik, you start looking at some of his numbers, 1,900 and 13 and 1,900 yards. We'll just call it 2,013 touchdowns. Sam Hartman's got 18 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, just like Klubnik. And he's got just around the same amount of yards too, like 2,100, 2,200, I think I want to say is where Sam Hartman is at. So in terms of like numbers, very similar. But the thing that makes Clemson, it's the big difference to me is Clemson turns the ball over in the least opportune times. And that's really what's been the backbreaker for this team is, everyone knows they're not going to have this explosive offense that they've had in the past, right? But if you can kind of play a little bit more into your defense, how Notre Dame does, you could overcome some of those challenges. And so you add in the inopportune turnovers, and then that game, I can't remember who they were playing, but Clemson had a goal line play, the last play of the game, and Klubnik calls his own number. He's not even listening to his head coach. And so I think that also shows you the discontinuity within that offense. And now you start introducing injuries to your offensive line, injuries to probably the longest tenured offensive player at Clemson right now, and Will Shipley. You take out one of their wide receivers. It's just a really bad cocktail on offense. And I just don't know if Clemson has enough to get over that on the, defensively. Like, sure, they're a solid defense, but can they be out there the whole game consistently shutting Notre Dame down? I just don't think so. And so it's not looking like a good day for Clemson on offense.
Yeah. And so knowing all of this that you now know with injuries and where they're at, and knowing
I need to be on FanDuel right now, honestly.
Don't worry, we'll give you a chance. But knowing all of this, and you're Al Golden, and you're getting all this information, what kind of game plan are you putting together against this offense?
Same game plan I used against USC. I think I don't think you necessarily need to blitz, but you can bring 4 or 5 and just do a lot of stunts on the defensive line, get in Klubnik's face, get him to get that ball out now, knowing and really if you got guys on the left side out, that's who you got to target stunts at those guys, make them communicate, guys that haven't been full-time starters, make them communicate to pick up stunts. That's got to be the game plan, is attack that left side of the offensive line. And again, do things to get pressure on Klubnik to get the ball out and let the best part of your defense take over. And that's the secondary. So I think that's exactly what you do. I don't think you need to get into, again, crazy blitzes where you're bringing 6 and, you're bringing linebackers and corners and safeties. Like, sure, it's okay to sprinkle some of that in here and there if you want to work on some things. But again, I think you can get the majority of the pressure created with just 4 or 5 man stunts.
Well, and I think what Notre Dame has done a really, really good job of, especially the last two games, is a lot of their delayed blitzes and things of that nature. Like they've gotten really good at that. Last year, they were not very good at the delayed blitzes. They showed too early or they showed too
And I
late.
think that plays into when a what they do so well pre-snap is disguise. And so when the quarterback is going through that first initial progression or reading and it's not there, and that kind of sense of panic settles in, and now Notre Dame's bringing a delayed stunt or a delayed blitz, that's just even more panic, right? And so like that's what they've been so good at this season. So I didn't mean to hijack your thought process there.
No, you're absolutely 100% right, and that's what you want to do to a young quarterback, right? I mean, he's starting his 9th game of the season, but he's still a young quarterback. And we've seen what he does when he gets rattled, right? He got rattled when he came into the Notre Dame game last year through a pick. Like, that's what he's going to – he's got 5 interceptions already this season, only 13 touchdowns. So he's going to get rattled. The wide receiving core for Clemson is nothing to write home about. And I've heard people compare Clemson's wide receiving core to Notre Dame's wide receiving core, and that's not a compliment. You know what I mean? So, like,
yeah.
He's going to be missing his biggest weapon potentially in Will Shipley. So you've got to take advantage of that. You've got to make him uncomfortable. Don't let him sit in the pocket. I think you can have success rushing 4 with this particular defensive line. But yeah, bring 5. Every once in a while, on when they're going to throw the ball, bring 6. I have complete faith in Notre Dame secondary to cover up Clemson's wide receivers. Complete confidence. And so, bring 6 when it's 3rd and 12 or something along those lines and really rush what Klubnik wants to do. I think that they can really have a great day just making Klubnik see ghosts, essentially. I mean, where's the pressure going to come from? Absolutely. They set the tone last week with the sack. It was a delayed blitz sack on the first play of the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying you need to go get a sack, but you need to be pressuring Klubnik from the jump so that he has
hit
no
on
idea
him.
what's happening.
Let him know you're there.
Absolutely. 100%. So we know that Clemson's defense is their calling card. You mentioned it, when we were talking about the offense. And Notre Dame is going to have their work cut out for moving the ball against this unit, but it can be done, and they've done it in the past, but just not with a Sam Hartman-led offense. So, just to give a couple of numbers, they're 38th in scoring defense, 16th in rushing defense, 9th in passing defense, and 6th in total defense. So it's a good defense. There's no doubt about it, right? So knowing what you know about this defense, we've seen this defense against Notre Dame, obviously last year. We've seen them on film this year. So how does this offense put up points against this defense? And they're going to have to score. I'm guessing they're going to have to score at least 3 touchdowns in order to win this game. So how are they going to make that happen?
Yeah, so I think a lot of what Notre Dame does is the run game opens up the pass game. But you started to get into some of Clemson's numbers: 6th in total defense, 9th in passing defense, 16th in rushing defense. I think Clemson knows that Notre Dame is a run first kind of team. I mean, look at how many touchdowns and rushing yards Audric Estime has. Those numbers are eye popping. And so if I'm Clemson, I think what they're going to do is shut down the run and force Sam Hartman to beat them in the passing game, right? Seeing those if Clemson flips on the tape from Pittsburgh last week, what happened in the first 2 drives? Interceptions, right? And so I think what you'll see out of Clemson is a more condensed box to start the game, and almost daring Notre Dame to run the ball, daring Notre Dame to pass the ball. And so I think you have to have more of a mentality of maybe a little bit pass first early in the game, and then allow that run game to kind of be your finisher as the game moves on. Because I think you're going to have a good amount of players in the box on if you're Clemson, because they're going to force Sam Hartman to beat them. And so I think you have to have a game plan to kind of open up the pass game a little bit early. And I don't think you need to do anything crazy. Like, I'm not saying take 30-yard shots down the field, but to Kirk Herbstreit's, famous words, find an extension of the run game. Maybe throw in some screens to Faison and Chris Tyree on the perimeter. Just get that ball out quick, but don't just hand the ball off into the belly of the beast of that Clemson defense. Do some things, maybe some jet sweeps around the outside. Maybe, some outside zone looks, just something to move the ball out of the middle of the field that's less, again, more of like traditional, just kind of power run plays. I think you can get into the passing game, more some ins and outs, some quick slants, some wide receiver screens. I think that's the stuff you can kind of get into to open up your run game a little bit more as the game progresses.
Well, I think the game plan that they had against Pittsburgh is, I mean, you could almost replicate it against Clemson, to be honest with you, because that's what they wanted to do. I mean, the first play of the game was a play action where they slipped Audric Estime out into the flat, and it was wide open. You know what I mean? And they did a lot of those, get the ball out fast, get it to the perimeter, do those different. I mean, obviously they were able to put up 38 offensive points. So, and two of those drives that almost one got to the red zone, one didn't, ended up with interceptions, right? And so 500 yards of total offense with that particular game plan, I think you could replicate it to a degree against this Clemson team. Now, no one is saying that the Clemson defense is the same as the Pitt defense, right? But we are talking about two teams that defense is their calling card, offense is their struggle. So I think that's a great way to go out and attack this Clemson defense. Get it to the perimeter, run the ball to the perimeter as well. Like you said, don't just run it up the belly of the beast. That's not going to get you anywhere. But if you attack the perimeter enough, now that softens up, and now you get your running game going.
Yeah, when is Audric Estime at his best? Late in the games when the middle starts to open up.
Exactly. Yep. I completely agree with you. And which is also, by the way, why I'm shocked at what his over-under number is. We're going to get to that in just a minute. All right. So that is our Clemson preview, Jess. Are you ready for some rapid fire?
Let's do this rapid fire, baby. It's game day edition.
It is game day edition, and I'm fired up for it. All right. Couple Notre Dame Clemson topics right off the bat. Buy or sell that Clemson loses a decided advantage with this game being a noon game as opposed to a night game in Death Valley.
Yeah, I buy that they lose a level of, how did you put it? They lose an advantage by putting this game at noon compared to the evening time, just because everyone's just a little bit more hyped up. The fans are a little bit louder. The game is more intense. It feels like the game gets diluted a little bit with what's happened in the past when everyone's just focused on a night game. Everything's bunched in. You got a good team coming in. It's a sellout crowd. It's still Death Valley. It's at home. All of these things. And so, yeah, I do think that they lose a little bit of an advantage by this game being at noon. But, the flip side of that, and I as a player, actually, I hated the noon games the most in college because of, it's just earlier mornings. You got to wake the body up a little bit faster. Notre Dame usually plays at 3 or 7, and I think they've played the NC State game was at noon. That might have been their only noon game this season. And so you just got to wake up that internal clock a little bit better. You instead of being ready to go like full adrenaline jacked up by 3 o'clock, you just got to get that timer going a little bit sooner. And so that's the only thing I would look for in terms of Notre Dame is just you want to make sure they're not sleepwalking a little bit. And that would be the only thing I'm fearful of.
Yeah, I mean, I buy it as well. I think Clemson wanted this game to be a night game. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I mean, they're really tough at home at night. I mean, really tough, right? And so, of course, they would want this game to be at night. I think the complete opposite is what happened, right? It's a noon game, and I think that tells you, look, Notre Dame's going to bring eyeballs to this game. Clemson's going to bring eyeballs to this game. So, I mean, it's going to be a highly watched game. I'm actually surprised that it got bumped all the way back to noon with how many people I still think are going to watch this game. But it just tells you how unimportant it is to ESPN, ABC, whatever, that they're putting this thing at noon. And from a fan standpoint, man, like moving it up essentially 7.5, 8 hours. They're not going to be as lubed up as they normally would have been. I mean, they're not going to be as hype as they normally would have been. You're not going to have, the prime time announcing crew that you normally would have. Like, it's not what it should be, right? And I think if both teams, and Notre Dame is included in this, if they were undefeated or if they had one loss, and the same thing you could be said for Clemson, then we're talking about, game day at Clemson and all these different
Notre Dame's third game day this season.
Yeah. The hype would be ridiculous, right? And now it's just another noon game. And I think that hurts Clemson. I really do. I think it hurts them. And
Yeah.
so Notre Dame can take advantage because we all know that they played a pretty darn good football game at NC State at noon. And that's the only other noon game that we have to compare it to. And I would say that Notre Dame did pretty darn well at noon. So definite missed advantage for Clemson. All right, next question. Scale of 1 to 10, the chances that Cody Bellinger signs with the Cubs.
When I first saw this, I was like, man, what do I really think about this? But to me, it's 50-50. So I'm gonna put it at a 5 out of 10. I really truly believe it's a toss-up. And the reason why I tell you it's a toss-up is I think the Cubs organization goes one of two routes. And I'll keep this kind of simple because I know this is game day Notre Dame edition.
That's all right. We're all over the place, baby. That's what we do.
I think the Cubs go one of two routes. I think they either re-sign Bellinger and get some other kind of critical pieces as well, maybe like a mid-level third baseman, a mid-level, another arm in the rotation. Basically, if you get Cody Bellinger, I think you add some kind of mid to some other, not that Cody Bellinger's average or mid, but I think you add other mid-level because of, what you're doing in terms of Bellinger's contract. But I think if they don't go Bellinger, I think they go for a bigger, maybe like Pete Alonso, maybe this is the opportunistic fan in me. I don't think Shohei Ohtani's off the table, to be honest with you. The Cubs got the money. It's a big enough market. And so that's what I'm kind of saying. I think if they go Ohtani, you're not going to see any Bellinger. But if they go Bellinger, you have more money to kind of go out and get some other pieces as well. So I think like Bellinger and others would be a package that adds up to like a Pete Alonso or a Shohei Ohtani. So I think you get either a really big star and a big contract, or you get like Cody Bellinger and like 2 or 3 other contracts as well. That's kind of how I see this situation going. So it's a 50-50 for me.
I kind of feel better about Bellinger plus than
Same.
I do about going to get like one big name. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like this is a win-win if you're Cody Bellinger, right? I mean, he just won Comeback Player of the Year. He did it as a Cub, right? So I think that there's something there for him and the Cubs. I think he enjoyed his time in Chicago. I think, you can see the blueprint for winning in Chicago right now.
Yes.
And if you bring him back and you, like you said, bring in a couple of other pieces, I just feel like that's the route to go. Now, whether they will do that or not is a whole other conversation. But I just feel like this is a win-win for both sides. I just do. I think if you're the Cubs organization, I think you get a lot of brownie points with the fans if you bring him back, because I think Cody Bellinger was a fan favorite last year. And the numbers that he put up speak for themselves. Like I said, comeback player of the year, right?
Yeah.
And so I think you got to make a run at him. I think you got to make a realistic run at him. And like you said, if you can bring him back and you bring in some other pieces, the Cubs are going to be set up to win right now.
Well, that's the thing is if you realistically looked at the Cubs from a season ago and you drop out the collapse that they had and not making the playoffs, I mean, it was expected that they weren't going to make the playoffs. The only reason this season became a disappointment is they didn't sell at the deadline and they flat out collapsed at the finish line.
Yeah,
and
they
so
did.
By definition of, where they were at beginning of the season to the end, it's still a win of a season. They are ahead of schedule for the kind of grand master plan that they've been kind of, establishing ever since that World Series window closed. And then they have another big thing that they have at their disposal is they have one of the best farm systems as well. So that's a big asset for them in terms of this offseason and potentially getting some pieces around Bellinger. And so I think the way you entice Bellinger is you say, hey, man, you won comeback player of the year. We collapsed and we feel like we're ahead of schedule compared to where we wanted to be at the end of the season. We re-sign you. We have some good farm pieces. We get a couple other additions. Let's go take this thing all the way now. We got a taste of it last season. Let's go and finish the thing out now.
Right. There were no expectations going into last year. I mean, let's be honest. Like that.
Right.
I had zero expectation that the Cubs were going to make the playoffs, and that's why I wasn't even all that upset when they kind of lost it down the stretch, because
that's why it didn't hurt as much.
Exactly, because they weren't going to make a lot of noise in the playoffs if they made it in, right? And so it's like they were a year ahead of schedule. And so next year, if they make the proper moves, I do expect them to be in the playoffs, and I will be pissed off if they don't make it in, right? I mean, it's just the way you look at it. And I think signing Cody Bellinger is the way to go. All right. Basketball question. Bobby Knight, famed IU basketball coach, passed away this week at the age of 83. He was one of the best college basketball coaches to grace the sidelines. So, Jesse, are you even old enough to remember anything about Bobby Knight?
I'm really not, but I saw the ESPN, I think 30 for 30 on Bob Knight. Whatever it was, I can't remember if it was like a 30 for 30 or if it was just like a random hour long, segment. And then, now with social media, you can easily find, old clips of Bob Knight. And there's two things that come to mind when I think about Bob Knight. One, seeing him chuck the chair across the court, that always comes to mind. That's probably, everyone's answer and like, oh yeah, whatever, cliche. But I mean, that's what I think of. That sums him up in, I think, in one short clip is just that intenseness that often got confused for anger or maybe not enjoying it or displeasement with what was going on. And thankfully, my dad isn't on the show, but it kind of reminds me of him when he was coaching. To be honest with you, he would get a little bit angry, get a little bit hot-headed, but it was in a place you had to understand where it was coming from. And I think that's the thing with Bob Knight is he puts on this not act, but he displays one thing, but it's just because of his intensity and knowing how things should be and the passion for his team and players to do well. And again, that was a large comparison that I saw with my dad is sometimes he would get, upset or, have a little, throw a chair moment here and there with some umpires, but you knew that it came from a place of passion and wanting his team to do well and win. And so that's the kind of biggest thing I take away from Bobby Knight.
Love it. I think you're spot on with that one. And I think that, Bobby Knight, he wasn't misunderstood. Like, I don't want to go that far. And I think he stepped over the line at times.
Correct.
But at the same time, he had a genuine love for his players. He had a genuine love for education at IU. I mean, I believe, he gave the money to build the library that's there. Like Bobby Knight was IU. Now, what I remember about Bob Knight, first of all, I hated IU growing up, so I got to put that out there. So I was not a Bob Knight fan, so to speak, but I always respected him for how he was as a coach and what he was able to accomplish, like always. And I remember, when I was in my 20s, early 20s or whatever, and, he was kind of going through all the stuff, getting fired from IU, like that all went down when I was like a freshman in college. And I remember thinking to myself, like, Bob Knight's the kind of guy I would send my kid to go get coached by. And maybe that's taboo these days, or whatever. But like, I know my kid, and I didn't even have that kid at the time. But like, I know my kid, like he can be coached hard, and I think you can be coached hard. You're the son of a coach, right? Like, I think that, if you can stomach it, if you can be coached hard, I think he's the perfect coach for you, right? And I've always wanted that for my kid. Somebody that's going to coach my kid hard on the floor, but he's also going to coach my kid hard in real life. Like, that's what I want. I would have no problem sending my kid to play for Bobby Knight. And the other thing, like his quotes that he would have, like just hilarious. I mean, most of them we can't, repeat because this is a family show or whatever. But like he was something else, man. And when he went to Texas Tech and he was in his, I remember this like it was yesterday. He went to Texas Tech. He was in his pregame or his introductory press conference, and he's got the red sweater on, and he's like, "This is the most comfortable red sweater that I've had on in 6 years." It's obviously a slight to IU. Like he had a way with words, man, and I always enjoyed listening to him speak. And he was actually on the cutting edge of like reality TV. And you probably don't even know this. They did a reality show about a bunch of walk-ons trying to make the Texas Tech basketball team.
I did not know about this.
I was riveted to that thing, man. Like, it was really interesting to watch. And like at the end of it, they picked one kid to walk on to the basketball team. I want to try to find that. I remember watching that when I was like 22, 23 years old, whatever the year was. And really being into like that was like the cutting edge of kind of like reality TV, you know what I mean? So, but Bobby Knight, one of the greatest coaches ever. He's going to be missed, obviously. And that was a tough one to take there from a sports fan, knowledge base this past week. So, all right. How about another baseball question? World Series ratings were as low as ever this year. It was rough with the Diamondbacks, the Rangers. Obviously, the Rangers ended up winning the World Series. Is there anything that Major League Baseball could have done to prevent this from happening, or are they just at the mercy of the fact that two small market teams were playing in the World Series?
Yeah, I just generally chalk that as what it is, because I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. I watched like one World Series game, and it was just simply because I just didn't have much interest in the two teams, and it sucks because like both teams are your typical teams who haven't won very much. And I think if you add in a lot of the how do I put it, like the old timers baseball fans, if you throw in the fact that a lot of these people are complaining about how do the Dodgers, after 100-win season, don't get the benefit of the doubt, and who was the Braves, another 100-win season, and it's like, okay, but the Dodgers had home field advantage and got swept. You know what I mean? Like they didn't even win one game and they had home field advantage. And so it's like, I don't even want to hear that as an excuse, but I think it put a lot of, distaste in a lot of people's mouths of, what's even the point, because we go through this long regular season and then the quote unquote best teams aren't even making it towards the end. And so you add that and you add it's two smaller market teams. I just think there was, you were kind of at the mercy of a lot of things that weren't really controllable.
It was like the perfect storm of crap for Major League Baseball. Like they didn't have any of their blue bloods, obviously, make it into the World Series. The Yankees, the Dodgers, the Cubs, the Red Sox, teams that are going to bring the eyeball. I mean, there's two small market teams that nobody watches except for those particular fans, and it's just not a huge fan base. And I just think that they were at the mercy of the fact that those are the teams that advanced. And, your big time team just didn't take care of business, man. Like that's on them. I mean, I get that they all had 100, the Braves, the Dodgers, 100-win seasons, all of that. But guys, you got to win when it counts. Like it's great that you won in the regular season, but you got to win when it counts, and they didn't. And I mean, I personally didn't watch any of the World Series. It didn't interest me. I didn't have a team in the fight. And I guess I'm a little weird. Like I generally wouldn't watch the World Series, even if my team, if my team wasn't in it, unless I don't know, something was intriguing about it. There was nothing intriguing about this World Series to me, so I didn't watch it. But I just think Major League Baseball just struck out when it came to the teams that they wanted in the World Series didn't get in. So any of those people out there with the conspiracy theories that all the good teams always get to the World Series, or like, Major League Baseball or whatever is trying to get so-and-so to the World Series. Not one person in the main office at Major League Baseball wanted it to be Rangers versus Diamondbacks.
Yeah,
okay?
exactly.
I can assure you of that. All right, last question for rapid fire, and then we're going to get into our game props and then our game predictions, Jess. So, buy or sell Notre Dame as the number 15th ranked team in the first college football playoff rankings that came out on Tuesday.
I think Notre Dame actually landed in like right where I got them. And I saw, when the AP came out with their poll earlier in the week, I was like, why is a 2-loss Notre Dame team ahead of some of these 1-loss teams? And like they were ahead of Louisville. Louisville has less losses and they beat Notre Dame head to head. So I actually thought the AP kind of got it wrong. And I feel like it did Notre Dame a disservice, or Notre Dame fans a disservice, because it put the idea in their head that they belong to be higher and that they need to be 12. But it's like Notre Dame is in the pecking order of the 2-loss teams. All of the 0-loss and 1-loss teams are ahead of Notre Dame, and it's for good reason, And so when you start looking at that next tier of 2-loss teams, like, are you upset that a 2-loss LSU is ahead of Notre Dame? Because that's the only thing that you can really argue. And so it's like, at this point in the season, with the initial rankings, and again, knowing about, a lot of these teams ahead of them are more of back-end schedules, those things are going to take care of themselves. This is the first ranking. Again, Notre Dame is a 2-loss team. I thought they fell in right where they deserved to be. I thought it was a happy, nice landing. But again, I think the AP poll did a lot of Notre Dame fans a disservice because it put this idea in their head that they deserve to be higher. But I thought they were overrated in the AP poll, to be honest with you. I was surprised seeing them kind of that high, knowing that Louisville was still behind them and some of these other one-loss teams were still kind of straggling behind them.
It's funny as I'm looking at the rankings, right? They got all the 8-0 teams, and then they got all the 7-1 teams. And they got all the 2-loss teams, and they just whatever rank them. But Notre Dame is sitting in a great position right now.
You just got to climb 5 more spots with 3 more games, and all those teams ahead of you have at least 1 or 2 ranked matchups left. So it's
exactly could potentially Notre Dame could potentially move up 2 spots this week. Obviously, Notre Dame has to win out. That's the asked and answered.
That's the number one thing.
Yes, but they could potentially move up. LSU plays Alabama. I think we all think Alabama's probably going to win that game.
Washington plays USC. You never know what might happen there.
Absolutely.
Texas has a backup quarterback, I'm pretty sure. I think Quinn Ewers is still hurt.
Missouri is playing Georgia, right? So, if Missouri and LSU lose, Notre Dame bumps up 2 spots just like that.
Right,
they're 13. And then you talk about the teams that you just brought up. So, Notre Dame is sitting pretty as far as I'm concerned, because at this point, as a Notre Dame fan, your goal at this point is to be in a New Year's Six, right?
Yeah.
If you're in the top 10, you're in.
And I think Notre Dame's in a great spot. You just sit back and watch those teams lose in front of you as you just finish. You just take care of business to end your season.
But you got to take care of business. That's obviously the most important thing. But they're in perfect position to just sit back, do their thing, and they'll rise right up into the top 10. Because it doesn't matter whether you're 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10. It does not matter. You're going to get into a New Year's Six no matter what rank you are. You know what I mean? And so top 10 is the goal. You're going to get in if you're Notre Dame and you win out. So I'm fine with it. It's a bye for me. I will say it was a little sticker shock because, as you said, I got spoiled by the 12 ranking in the AP, and I hadn't really analyzed the AP and who was where, and it's 15, that seemed low. But then when you look at it, it's is it though?
Yeah.
No.
You're arguing. Your only argument is if you're jockeying for LSU for 1 more spot.
Exactly.
And again, they're playing Alabama this week, so who cares?
Right. Exactly. Because if LSU wins that game, they're going to skyrocket up.
And Bama's got 2 losses now.
They're heading back. So, it doesn't matter.
I think the best thing I took and what I was mainly looking for in this first ranking is just what the thought process is. What is the committee focusing on this season in their rankings? And it seems like they're taking into account more so of who you've played in your resume and kind of strength of schedule. And I'm on board for that. So I enjoyed this ranking. I thought it was perfectly fine.
I think they did fine. And Ohio, Georgia fans are upset that Ohio State's number 1, all these different things. Well, you know what, Georgia, you haven't played anybody.
Yeah.
And your strength of schedule sucks. So Ohio, I think Georgia's probably a better team than Ohio State, but they're clearly looking at resumes and records right now. And right now, Ohio State's resume and record is better than Georgia.
Yep.
And that's fine. It's also the beginning of November. The rankings that matter are in December. So everything's going to play out, folks. I promise. All right. Jesse's favorite part of the show, game props. Let's do this. So you lead us through this. And let's go.
Sir. Let's we'll get through this one a little quick. So first I kind of broke this down. There's game props. I looked at team props first and then individual props. So let's go through these team props. Notre Dame is minus 162 on the money line. I think that's a very favorable, generous for Notre Dame. I think that number could be more so into the minus 200s. And so I think that's a great opportunity to snag that up. I would definitely be putting a little bit of money on that or include that in some of my parlays.
All right. So what about the spread though? Minus 3.5 for Notre Dame.
I like this spread as well. Earlier in the week, I think it opened at 2.5 or 3. So clearly seeing it at 3.5 right now means that there has been a good amount of money on Notre Dame to cover the spread. So anytime it goes up, that means that the books are seeing a large influx on that, on the lower spread that was out earlier in the week. I would feel comfortable taking this all the way up to -6.5. I think Notre Dame could win this game by at least a touchdown. And so if you want to make a little bit of extra money, take an alternate spread and bump
Move
that
that
up
line.
to move that needle to -6.5.
Move that line, baby. I agree.
And if you want to be real, cautious, like maybe 5.5, right? Like maybe it's not a touchdown, but it's a 2 field goal type victory, or maybe like a weird extra point happens, towards the end. I don't know, but I still feel like you could get away with 5.5 or 6.5 in terms of alternate spread.
Move the line.
Game total over and under 44.5. Tell me what you think about that, Vince.
This one's very interesting because I don't know that there's going to be a ton of points scored in this game, right? And man, my prediction, I have it as an under. I don't feel good about that number. I think it's a little bit high. So I think I would take the under on this one. But then again, I think I didn't expect Notre Dame to score 58 points last week. So I think I would still take the under, though.
I'm going to take the under as well. I think you have two very, very solid defenses. I think Clemson's going to have a game plan that relies more so on their defense, maybe a little bit more time of, controlled clock, time of possession. And then you start looking at it on the other side. Clemson has, like you said, a very average offense. I think Notre Dame's offense is somewhere between average and elite. And so I would give Notre Dame's offense a bump, but I don't think with Notre Dame's defense that Notre Dame has enough offense to bridge the gap to get that over the 44.5. So I also like the under as well.
Nice.
And so then next, in terms of the team category, I broke down Notre Dame total points and Clemson total points. So the over under for Notre Dame's total points is 23.5. Clemson's total points is over under is 20.5. I'll be quick about these. I think Clemson hits the under, and I think Notre Dame just barely nicks that over at the end of the day.
Yep. That's what I would take too. I would take Notre Dame on the over, and I would take Clemson on the under. If Clemson scores 21 points, I'll be shocked, to be perfectly honest with you. With the way Notre Dame's defense has played and the way Clemson's offense has played, and with their missing starters and all of that, I just don't see the 21 points happening.
Nice. So now I have some player props. First, we'll get into Sam Hartman. Over under 230 passing yards.
Oh, this is tough, man.
His numbers always feel very right on point.
Yeah, they do, man. I like what they've been doing with the offense. I like the fact that they're taking some shots. I think they're going to continue to take some shots. So I'll take the over here reluctantly.
So you start looking at Sam Hartman's game logs. He had 175 against Ohio State, 222 against Duke, 254 against Louisville, 126 against USC, and 288 against Pitt. So in 3 of those 5 games, he's getting real close. I think Ohio State's defense is honestly better than Clemson's. Man, it's right there though, and I think that Duke's defense is also very similar to Clemson's, might be a little bit better. Give me the over, just because I think that they're going to have to pass the ball a little bit more to open up that run game later in the game, like we were talking about earlier. So I think you're going to see a lot of passing earlier on, and then it's going to downshift as the game goes. So give me that over, but just because they come out a little hot. Okay, Sam Hartman, over under 1.5 passing touchdowns.
Man, this one burned me last time, and I'm really upset about it to this day.
He hasn't had a passing touchdown in like 2 games. Yeah. Oh no, sorry. He had some against USC. I take that back.
Yeah, he did, but he had 0 in the last game, even though he hit some bombs that got him down like real close, but then of course they ran it in. So, I mean, realistically, you take the over here.
Yeah,
but I'm
it's plus money too. It was like plus 110. So technically,
oh yeah,
it's the him getting over 1.5 is the underdog in this situation. I think it's worth teasing it, just knowing it's a little bit juiced up, and so I would take the over here. I like to live by the overs more so than die by the unders.
I hear you.
Okay, Audric estimate. These are interesting. Over and under 75.5 rushing yards.
I feel like that's low, man. I know that Clemson's got a good defense, but they're going to feed him at the end of the game, where I think he picks up some yardage. I'm taking the over on 75.5.
Yeah, I also kind of feel the same way. A little low. And really the only bad game that Audric Estime had in the last 5 was against Louisville. And, I just don't see that kind of game happening again. I think he definitely gets to 75.5. And then his anytime touchdown is the lowest I've seen it all season, minus 195, which isn't like in terms of touchdowns, it's still like not great odds, but for Audric, like I've seen it like minus 400 in the season. I've seen it like minus 300 in the season. I mean, crap, if you went with Audric Estime to score 2+ touchdowns in the last 3 games, you would be making a good amount of money. I'm in the believer of Audric's got to prove me wrong, and so I think he's going to get another touchdown this game.
I mean, death taxes and Audric Estime in the end zone, man. Like I would take that all day as one of my parlay legs. There's no chance I would not take that.
They love to get down in the 5, and it's just Audric Estime time. Like that is, it's coming. So, and that's the thing is, that they're always going to be in that situation too. He's always going to have that opportunity for a goal line touchdown. That's what they want to do. They want to give him the ball. So if that's what they want to do, and he's going to get his opportunities, why not take it?
Yep, taking it all day.
All right. And so now I wanted to get into some of these who FanDuel is projecting as, some of Notre Dame's leading receivers, I guess you could say, or guys that they had lines on. So we'll start with Rico Flores, under 32.5 receiving yards.
I will take the over on that. I think that's 1 reception, potentially, maybe 2.
Yeah, maybe 2. I'm in the same boat. I think that Rico Flores is due for a good game, especially with Mitchell Evans being out. Him and Hartman have that connection. I think he feels somewhat comfortable with Flores, and so that's like only 1 or 2 catches. How do you feel about it? Anytime touchdown being at plus 210.
See, that's tough. He hasn't been in the end zone in a while.
Yeah, I don't trust any of these Notre Dame wide receivers, so I would stay away from.
I would stay away from all of the anytime touchdown, even though we're talking about Sam Hartman hitting the over on 1.5 touchdowns. I don't know who the heck he's going to.
You just don't know who it's going to.
Right. So
it could be Cooper Flanagan out of like a 3 tight end play action look. It's just you don't know what's going to happen.
Not touching it.
Chris Tyree over under 38.5 receiving yards and anytime touchdown plus 240.
Anytime Chris Tyree has a 3 in front of the number of receiving yards, I'm taking it.
That's 1 catch, man. I don't understand. These books don't get it. Like he only has 2 or 3 receptions per game, but like he averages, I think, almost like 20 yards a reception. So it's like, give me the over every time.
Every time. But I'm not touching the anytime touchdown score.
Yeah, I'm not touching that either. Okay. Last one. Holden Stays 35.5 receiving yards plus 210 anytime touchdown.
So obviously we assume he's going to be the number 1 tight end. He is the only other tight end that has been targeted by Sam Hartman, because Cooper Flanagan was obviously targeted by Steve Angeli. I will take the over here. I think the tight end, I think he's going to get ignored a little bit because, Mitchell Evans is not. No, Mitchell Evans has been the target of a lot of defensive pressure and a lot of, defensive attention, I should say. But he's out, and I think they're going to forget about the tight end, and Holden Stays will make him pay. So I'll take the over on the yards, and I'm not touching the anytime score.
I would same with you. I think he's going to get his catches, and I think Sam Hartman likes that tight end connection. And obviously with Evans being out, he's going to step into that role. So give me the over on those receiving yards, and also give me a little teaser of parlay with the over on the yards and an anytime touchdown for Stays. He had that touchdown taken away last week on a bogus offensive pass interference call by Mitch Evans, or called on Mitch Evans. I think that a tight end is due for a touchdown this week, and I just think he's going to get that one back from last week. I think you're going to see a tight end score. I just don't know who it's going to be, but if you're playing the odds, I think Holden Stays gives you the best odds. So give that a little parlay, put $5 on it, and let's see what happens.
Yeah, man. I'll be parlaying something. You can be sure of that.
All right. Well, that wraps up all the game props I have, Vince.
Yes, sir. So now it's game prediction time, man. So you hit lead off here. What do you got?
All right. So we talked about how this game is, over under 44.5 points. And I believe that both defenses are going to hold this game under 44.5 points. So a low scoring affair. I think Notre Dame needs to hit around 21, 24 to definitely feel comfortable. If you really want to feel comfortable, you'll get into the 30s. I just don't see that happening. Notre Dame's going to fall between somewhere like 20 and 30. I think they get 3 touchdowns and 2 field goals. So that puts me at Notre Dame at 27. And I just don't think Clemson has enough dynamically on offense. They don't have the quarterback like they've had. They don't have wide receivers like they've had. And now Will Shipley's hurt. You introduce offensive linemen being hurt. You introduce Notre Dame's defense is playing arguably the best it's had or the best it has been playing in maybe 2 or 3 seasons. I think Clemson sneaks in a touchdown. I think they might sneak in a garbage time field goal. So I'm looking at Clemson right around 10 or 13, but I'm going to go with 13 for Clemson, 27-13 Notre Dame victory.
I like where your head's at. I've said all along, all this week that I think Notre Dame's got to score 3 touchdowns to win this game. I agree with you. If they get in the 30s, it's game over. There's no chance. Clemson doesn't have a chance of getting in the 30s. That's what I'll say. So if Notre Dame can get in the 30s, there's no chance Notre Dame loses this game. I was a little bit more conservative than you, but not by a whole lot. I've got Notre Dame 24, Clemson 10. I think
field goals each way. Yeah. That's all our difference is.
Yep. I think that Notre Dame's defense is gonna come out hot again. I think they're gonna continue it. I think that Notre Dame program believes they have Clemson's number. I really do believe, and they're going to come out with that kind of intensity, that kind of confidence, and it's going to show. So I think they get in the end zone 3 times, kick a field goal. I think Clemson finds a way to get in the end zone once and kicks a field goal. And so 24-10 for me. So we both got Irish victories.
Heck yeah.
All right, man. So that's going to do it for this edition of the IB Nation Sports Talk Countdown to Kickoff. Make sure you hit the like button, the subscribe button, hit that notification bell, share with your family and friends. We will be back right after the game. I believe Ryan and I will be jumping into the post-game show probably 10-ish minutes after the game wraps up. And then Brian will join us when he gets back from Clemson, back to the hotel. So make sure you join us, man. We're going to have a lot of fun talking about an Irish victory is my guess. So
daylight savings this week. Don't forget about those clocks, baby.
Get to sleep in an extra hour.
I need it. I need it after this week.
You're not wrong, dude. You're not wrong. So for Jesse, I'm Vince, and we will talk to you next time on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.